Scott McLean from TranceMusicMastery.com, and in this video I'm going to continue walking through the sketch project called Mirrors, which is based on a number of My Loops samples, and this kit 61 called Mirrors from the myloops.net Trance Obsession Volume 1 MIDI CD. This video I'm going to go through the pad part, which is going to cover the chord progression as well as the programming for the pad and the effects chain that I have set up for this pad. I'll play through this just one time. Okay, so this is a 4-chord progression, and each chord is held for 2 bars. So the overall pattern is, a chord for 2 bars, then the next chord for 2 bars, the third chord for 2 bars, and the fourth chord for 2 bars. That's fairly common in trance tracks. There are other variations that you'll find, but this is a fairly common one. Now, if we look at this, just to analyze this a little bit from a music theory perspective, if we look at this, the bottom notes essentially form the bass line, okay? So if we zoom in on these, we can see the note names displayed here. It's F, G sharp, A sharp, C sharp, okay? So if we remember that this sketch is based on F minor, if we were to look at scale degrees, if you're familiar with music theory, then this would be the first degree of the scale. F would be the first degree. G sharp would be the third, A sharp would be the fourth, and C sharp would be the fifth. So this is a 1, 3, 4, 5 chord progression. Okay? Now there's a couple nuances of these last 2 chords which I'll get into in a moment. But in general, this is a 1, 3, 4, 5 chord progression. Okay? Now, to determine these chords, we can actually just assume for a moment that they actually follow this bass line, all right, or the root notes. Okay, so it would be an F minor chord followed by a G sharp major, followed by an A sharp minor, followed by a C sharp major. Okay, so we're just going to work under that assumption for a moment and verify that by analyzing these notes up here. All right, so an F minor chord would consist of the notes F, G sharp, and C. Okay, just a simple triad chord. F, G sharp, and C. All right, well, if we look at these notes, we've got the F, the G sharp, and the C is not up here. Instead of being up here, it's actually down here. So this is known as a inverted form of the F, G sharp, or of the F minor chord. All right, and it turns out it's the second inversion. Okay, and all an inversion is when you're moving the notes around. So if I brought this up here, that would be the triad in root position with the F in the root of the chord. The first inversion would be I'd move F up an octave. So now F's on top, G sharp's at the bottom. And then the second inversion would be moving G sharp up an octave. And this would be the second inversion. In fact, this is the exact chord we have if we just moved it down 1 octave. This is the first chord in this clip. So this is a F minor in second inversion position. Alright, so now we're going to go from an F minor to what should be a G sharp major. Alright, so let's look at these notes here. We've got the G sharp here, but it's not in the root, so this is probably an inverted form. G sharp, then C, then D sharp. That would be a G sharp minor chord triad. And in fact, we have a G sharp, C, and D sharp here. So again, this is an inverted form. And anytime that that top note in the triad is in the root, that's the second inversion form of the chord. All right, now the next chord is a little tricky, okay, because we're extending this C note into bars 5 and 6 when we play this third chord. So for a moment, I'm just going to back this off just so we can focus on the triad form of the chord, and then I'll reintroduce this and explain what's going on here from a music theory perspective. Alright, so looking at the third chord that's being played, if we look at the note in the bass, it's an A sharp. So we would expect this to be an A sharp minor chord, okay? And if we look at it, we've got A sharp. The next note we would expect would be C sharp and then F. And in fact, we have both of those at the bottom. What traditionally would be the root of the chord here, if we had an A sharp down here, A sharp, C sharp, F, that would be an A minor, A sharp minor. Anytime that root note has been moved up an octave up top here, that's the first inversion form of the chord. So we've got C sharp, F, and A sharp. So this is in fact an A sharp minor, okay? If you remember, we had this C note here playing along with this form of the chord. And to determine what that C is doing, we want to look at what the interval is between the root of the chord, and remember this is an inverted form, so if we weren't inverting this, this A sharp would be one octave lower, and that would form the root. So we want to look at what the interval is between this A sharp note and the C up here. Well, an A sharp to an A sharp would be an octave, and that would be an eighth basically. So one more whole step or full tone would be a ninth. All right, so the interval from A sharp down here up to a C here is considered a ninth. So in fact, this would be an A sharp minor add 9 because we're adding a ninth to the triad chord. And then of course it's the inverted form of the triad here with the ninth added on top. So that's what that chord is. It's considered an A sharp minor add 9. Now we can see a similar thing occurring in the fourth chord because we have 4 notes. All right, so let's look at what that root note was. It's a C sharp. So again, this is probably a C sharp major chord. So let's just verify that first. So we've got a C sharp, an F, G sharp, and an A sharp. A C sharp major would consist of C sharp, F, G sharp. Okay, that forms the C sharp major triad chord. Okay, and in fact, it's in root position, right? Because C sharp's at the bottom. So C sharp, F, and G sharp. And then there's an A sharp here on top that's been added to the triad. And to determine what that is, we look at the interval from the root note up to that A sharp. And in this case, it's a C sharp to an A sharp. And that is a sixth interval of a sixth. So we say that this is a C sharp major add 6 chord. So that takes care of the music theory explanation of the chord. I'm going to play it one more time. Okay, so we've gone through the clip, and just to point out in the beginning, pretty much just playing the first chord in the progression. I've brought the loop point for this clip back to just the first 2 bars, and it just repeats all the way through until we begin the full progression of the 4 chords. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the sound design for this and the effects chain for the mix of the pad. Let me bring up Silent 1, and I'm just going to look at part A and part B. So part A, both oscillators are being used, also part B, okay? So for part A, I've got oscillator A1 down 1 octave, sawtooth waveform, volumes max, 4 voices with some detuning and stereo widening here. The width of these 4 voices is spread maximum. And oscillator A1 is panned to the left. Then I've got the amplifier envelope set up so that the attack is not so abrupt, but it's about halfway between, it's about a quarter way up. Decay at 0, sustain full, and then release almost halfway. Oscillator A2, octave 0, sawtooth waveform, 4 voices, volume max, detune slightly less than halfway, stereo widening as well, and then pan to the right. That helps widen it. So having one oscillator pan to the left, another oscillator pan to the right helps give a wider sound. Alright, let's look at part B. Part B, oscillator B1, octave 0, sawtooth waveform, voices 8, detune slightly less than half, max volume, max stereo widening, panned in the center. This one, the amplitude envelope is fast attack, fast decay, maximum sustain, and release is less than half. Oscillator B2, the octave is pitched up 1 octave. Volume is max, sawtooth waveform, voice is 8, detune slightly less than half. That, again, I've said it before in some of the other videos, detuning helps fatten up the sound. The stereo widening, stereo set to max, and then pan in the center. I'm not using any effects on this pad sound, so if we just listen to it as it is now without any compression, in fact, I'll disable all of the effects here. So this is just the raw sound that I started with from the oscillators, and it's going through this filter here, filter A. Okay, now what I did there is I had made an adjustment to one of these control values, and in live it will indicate that you've now changed some settings from what's in the arrangement view by flagging this as a red icon. Like if I change the cutoff, now that goes red, and what I can do is click that. It sets that back to where it was. Now it does that because I've got some automation on Silent 1 for the pad, the filter that's on this pad for the cutoff frequency. And so if I'll go and I'll explain this more, but if I just go to a point here where the pad is fully, or the filter is, cutoff frequency is at the maximum value, you'll hear how bright this pad sounds. Okay, so next what I want to do is go ahead and just close Silent 1 and bring up Compressor. This is going to add side chaining. So I'll go ahead and play this track, the pad. Next, I added an auto filter to cut out some of the low end because I wanted to make room for this deep bass part, both of these, bass 1 and bass 3, that are going to be playing the bass note of the chord progression. So F, G sharp, A sharp, C sharp. And both bass tracks are playing the same part. Okay? So I'll go ahead and demo that here. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is look at enabling this auto filter and playing that again. This bass, if you remember, this bass 1, a little bit of high end to it. Let's listen to bass 3. It's much lower, okay? So that's the one that I'm really concerned about with this auto filter here, to cut out the low end. We're going to listen to both of these, the pad and bass 3 soloed together. And remember, right now it's pretty dry. I don't have these effects enabled. So then the last auto filter is there to just kind of roll off some of the high end when the filter on the Silent 1 is fully open. And it has a little bit of modulation, LFO modulation on the cutoff frequency to add some movement. So let's listen to the pad by itself here. So you can hear how that auto filter is cutting just a little bit of that top end off on the pad sound. So next, let's check out the ping pong delay for the pad, which is send A here. So let me go ahead and just play that. Okay, so that helps add some movement to the pad sound, having that delay. Finally, the reverb here. And then what I'll do is I'll come back here and I'll play the bass part, bass 3, with the pad, with all the effects enabled. So hear it one more time. Okay, so you get the idea for how the pad part is produced in this track, in this sketch. Now, in the next video, I'm going to go through the pluck. I'll see you in the next video.